Hello everybody, I'm back in the garage and we're looking at 1 Corinthians 13 for the final time today. Mike is going to take us on to something else tomorrow, but the verse that I want to look at is verse 7. And this is kind of towards the end of Paul's great passage on love, and it talks about how love always hopes, always perseveres. And one of the things that I've been remembering as I've read this passage again is that love, although it's an emotion and it is a feeling, it's much more than that. It's a decision about how we want to live towards other people. And you know, if you see people make their vows on their wedding day, there's obviously a lot of emotion involved, rightly so, in that moment. But it's also fascinating that the vows are very specific about how they're going to live. The vows don't talk about how they're going to feel towards another person. They talk about how they're going to act towards the other person. So in sickness and in health and till death do us part, and for richer and for poorer, and I'm going to commit to you. So it's a description of how I'm going to act towards you. This will be my attitude and these will be my actions. 1 Corinthians 13 is just that. It's this okay, love is what we want to do, but let's break that down into specifics. And so if we want to live a life of love and love others in the way that we have been loved by Jesus, this is such a helpful guide for us as to what our attitude and our actions towards other people are meant to look like. And this little bit at the end, love always hopes. The way that the Message puts that is it says, love always looks for the best in people. Love always looks for the best. And I love that because it's a real challenge to my heart. Naturally, as human beings, not all of us, but certainly quite a few of us, and I'm in this category, we're programmed to look for the worst in other people, not the best. We like to focus on their failures and on their weaknesses, usually because it makes us feel a bit better about our own failures and our own weaknesses. And, you know, you just see the conversations so often that happen on social media where we love to be outraged about other people's faults. And the problem is not social media. All social media is doing is it's just giving a megaphone to what's already going on inside of our hearts anyway. So we have this tendency to look for the worst in others. And in fact, we're told, by Jesus and in Scripture that we're to look for the best. And some of the reason we do look for the worst is because we've been let down by people, and maybe once we were idealists and then we became disillusioned because we got hurt and wounded, and so we've ended up being jaded and we've ended up being cynical. And I understand that. But what is a challenge for us to recognize is if that's where we're at in our attitude, that's when we've departed from the way of Jesus. And I don't think he's rebuking us about that, but we might want to come to him and ask him to help us process that and to soften our hearts again, that we would have a heart that is looking for the best in others and hoping for the best from them. That's just the way that Jesus treated people. And so his disciples, you know, that he wasn't naive, Jesus. He was very realistic. He knew there were a bunch of numpties. Like, he was very clear about that. Like, he, you know, all sorts of points, they made that obvious to him. He knew Judas was going to betray him. That wasn't something that was a surprise to him when it happened. And yet his approach to them, all the way through the Gospels, although he told them off when he needed to, and he tried to help them grow, he saw the best in them. He looked for the best in them. And so really practically, how we might do that, what that might look like for us, is rather than looking for people's faults, it's trying to catch them doing something right. You know, our attitude is often, I'm going to catch you out. Well, how about instead make it, I'm going to catch you in? I remember reading in one book this lady talking about how the quickest way to get her dad's attention was to do something wrong. Because the moment she did something wrong, he was focused on her. And how about we catch people doing something right? And again, we mentioned it the other day when we were talking about encouragement, which is something everybody is starved for, to find people and just to say, hey, I saw you do this and I thought that was amazing. And we do that in the context of we see all of the faults, you know, it's not that we pretend they're not there. We do see all of the weaknesses, but what we choose to focus on, and we'll challenge them when that's needed, but what we choose to focus on is the best and reflect the best back to people, because so often people do not see the best in themselves. And what they need is someone to come alongside them, a champion who comes to them and says, hey, I believe in you. I believe in you. There's such a power in being a person who believes in somebody else. So love always hopes. It doesn't do that despite the evidence. It looks at the evidence and yet it refuses to believe the worst things and it focuses on the best things. Love always hopes. And then it says, love always perseveres. I think another way of putting that is love refuses to give up on somebody. And again, that's not pretending. It's not going off into a fantasy land to escape reality. It's recognizing how bleak a situation might be. And yet it's saying, I'm not going to quit on you. And so Jesus, again, is the perfect example for us, because his disciples utterly failed him at the end. You know, in his hour of need, Peter denied ever knowing him, his best mate, and the rest of them just abandoned him, not to mention Judas. And then after the resurrection, Jesus appears to the disciples, and he doesn't sort of have a massive go at them and say, you guys just totally let me down there. It's not that he doesn't acknowledge it with Peter. He obviously has a conversation with him about it, but he's refusing to give up on them, even though the evidence is that they're absolutely useless and they're never going to be able to grow the church. Jesus is committed to them. And for us, if we want to love people in the way that Jesus has loved us, it's choosing to be committed to them, even when the evidence is really, really hard. Now that's complex. I don't want to make it sound really simple. Relationships are painful. There's a lot of hurt involved. We've got to be honest about when we're wounded and things like that. But one picture that's helped me as I've thought about how do I not give up on people even when it seems like they're not even interested in knowing me anymore, is I remember hearing Rob Parsons from Care for the Family speak, and he was talking about how for parents, if they have a child that goes away from Jesus and rejects them, that's really painful. And I think the same obviously is true if we've got a sibling or a parent or something like that, a good friend who has turned their back on Jesus and sometimes turned their back even on us. And he tells a little story about a lady who they had a daughter, and when she was 18, she walked out the house. She cut off all relationship with them. She said, I don't want to know you. She turned her back on her faith. And this lady, every night before they went to bed, she would turn to her husband and just say, leave the light on. Just leave the light on in the porch outside the house. And every Christmas, she would decorate this little Christmas tree they had in their front yard, just like they used to do when the girl was small. And after, I think it's 4 or 5 years, the girl turned up on their doorstep, having had no contact with them all that time. And there was an amazing reconciliation. She came back into a relationship with them. She came back into her faith. And then she said to them, sometimes at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, I would drive to the street and I would sit outside, and every single house in the street was pitch black, apart from yours that had the light on outside. And she said, I knew you'd left that light on for me. And Rob Parsons says, whatever you do, always leave the light on. And so for us, part of refusing to give up on people, sometimes it looks like always leaving the light on. Like one picture I have of 1 Corinthians 13 from Scripture is the father of the prodigal standing at the side of the road. He must have been standing there day after day to spot him when he was far away, always hoping, refusing to give up.